estão absolutamente ávidas por isso, estão desejosas disso, querem isso, não sabem expressar o quanto querem isso. No entanto, isso não ocorre porque os nossos gestores educacionais, os nossos professores, simplesmente são velhos. Velhos na idade, velhos na não aderência, a não se sentirem proprietários daquela linguagem, se sentem distanciados, se sentem diminuídos, o que é uma grande bobagem. Porque não é que o professor não possa fazer uma página, ele não vai fazer a página. Mas enquanto cada disciplina não tiver uma página, que é uma interface virtual de interação do professor com os seus estudantes, dos estudantes entre si, só que ele não sabe fazer essa página, ele não vai aprender a fazer essa página. Assim como o cientista aprendeu que ele sozinho não vai, com a linha de pesquisa dele, resolver o problema, nós vamos ter uma fase aguda, onde o professor terá que ser sensibilizado. Alguns não serão, irão embora. Mas de que ele não é mais o único responsável no processo de aprendizagem. É uma equipe. E a equipe, para piorar a situação, é constituída pelo professor, que, em tese, guia o conteúdo, e por uma criança, que vai desenvolver um portal educacional. Não sei como que a legislação brasileira vai resolver, mas há indicadores fortes que as grandes funcionalidades dos portais educacionais só são solúveis por pessoas abaixo de 16 anos. O que no Brasil é crime trabalhar. Portanto, ou vamos fazer trabalho clandestino, ou, o que é pior, não vamos resolver o problema das nossas páginas educacionais. Bom, eu só quis dar um primeiro... essas são as 3 horas. Esse aqui é um livro que deve sair, não estou fazendo propaganda não, já fiz propaganda dela. É um livro que deve sair agora em novembro. Agora ele demora porque ele é editado na Índia. Ele é impresso na Índia, né? É um negócio mais maluco do mundo. Então, muito obrigado a todos, um grande prazer.
Professor Mota, pela instigante palestra, que traz muitos problemas, né? Eu acho que alimenta uma discussão interessante. É um prazer agora especial para mim convidar para a mesa a professora Carla Salvaterra, que é vice-reitora da Universidade de Bolonha, que é profissionalmente uma historiadora de história moderna, mas também, além de uma atividade de pesquisa importante sobre o contexto clássico, com várias participações em redes internacionais, é em particular a grande, como eu poderia dizer, promotora das múltiplas relações que a Universidade de Bolonha construiu com o Brasil, sobretudo graças a um apoio fundamental que foi do embaixador Viegas durante a sua missão na Itália. Eu cito só 3 objetos que foram construídos dentro dessa parceria forte entre a Universidade de Bolonha e a Embaixada do Brasil: uma fundação cultural, FIBRA, para promover relações consistentes no campo cultural entre Itália e o Brasil, um grupo de pesquisa integrado, um Integrated Research Team, que representa uma espécie de departamento virtual. Estava pensando justamente nas considerações do professor Mota sobre essa necessidade de renovar as nossas práticas de trabalho. Ou seja, todos os pesquisadores que trabalham no Brasil, na Universidade de Bolonha, têm uma possibilidade virtual de encontro numa mesa projetual comum. E, enfim, a grande obra, que é a construção realmente bottom-up da rede de Ciências Sem Fronteiras na Itália. Portanto, é pessoalmente um grande prazer dar a palavra à professora Carla. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigada, Roberto. I'm sorry, I cannot speak Portuguese, so I will give my presentation in English. But first of all, let me thank really from her, the colleagues from the University of Federal of Santa Caterina for the invitation, and thanks to the Instituto Brasil Europa for accepting the University of Bologna as an affiliate partner and for inviting us here today. So my presentation, let me check if I'm able to. My presentation, I tried to put in a PowerPoint the main thread of the talks I would like to share with you. First of all, I would like to tell you something about the context where I'm coming from. Roberto already told some words, but I would like just to contextualize a little bit more, because of the, as Roberto told at the beginning, the importance of the situated knowledge that we are sharing. I would like to share some thoughts which have already been illustrated by the colleague before about interdisciplinarity as an area in which at least knowledge production, knowledge exchange are concerned, and it's an area in which we should think carefully about asymmetry and power relations when we speak about the interactions of disciplines and of knowledge exchange. There is also an important discussion. Interdisciplinarity is a practice, but is also a disciplinary area per se. So there is an important theoretical discussion in which I don't want to enter because it's not in my competencies, but I think we should try to focus at least on some needs that we can take out of the scientific work which has been doing extensively in studying the area of interdisciplinarity. And then I would like to go to the main point of my presentation, which is the intersection between interdisciplinarity and the internationalization process. I'm here on one side as an historian, on the other side acting as Vice Rector for International Relations of a university. So my challenges, my own experience is that of trying to combine these two aspects, and I think there are at least three main areas in which we can see an important intersection of these two dimensions. And then to conclude, I would like to share with you some experience that we have in our university about building integrated research teams, interdisciplinary research teams, and especially the one about Brazil that Roberto was mentioning. And if we have some more time, maybe spend a few words on a new project which we are just starting together with the Institute Brasil Europa. So the first, as I mentioned, I would like to conceptualize and to come with you with the questions I asked myself when I was asked to give this presentation. My conceptual framework, I come from history, and I'm very much attached to the idea of the historical development of disciplines, but at the same time I'm deeply involved in the actual practice of implementing actions within a university and in the area of international relations. So my question is, why shall we discuss this topic in the context of IBE? Where is this concept of interdisciplinarity coming from in our discussion? And what can I contribute to this in this specific context? And I think that interdisciplinarity in this context is particularly important because it's helped to place ourselves, I say ourselves, we as the Institute Brasil Europa, how can we place us within the high-level policy dialogue Europe and Brazil, but how can the European higher education area, the European research area, and the Brazilian higher education system and the Brazilian research and innovation system place themselves engaged at a global scale? So these were the questions that were behind my mind when I started to work on this presentation. So the first thing I would like to emphasize is that I'm sorry because everything seems here one single line. My specific field papyrology, and in fact in ancient Egypt there was no separation between words. So it seems that the computer has, yes, has taken up something about my own work. But I would like to go back to a concept which has already been emphasized in the former presentation, and this is the close, the extremely deep importance that in the word discipline has the etymological word discere, that is learning. So when we talk about interdisciplinarity, we should not focus only on interdisciplinary research, but we should really focus on the teaching dimension, because it's the professionalization in the teaching dimension which has created the disciplines and which is also helping us in, or challenging us in overcoming the disciplines. And the second element, which I think is extremely important in our discussion, is the historical context in which the epistemic ordering of the different forms of knowledge has taken place. We cannot go into a discussion if we are not really conscious of how much importance the context, the historical context had and will have in the development which we are addressing now, and I think that was quite clear from the former presentation. Again, I would like to focus on two aspects, and the aspects of the practice and the aspects of the theory. When we are talking about interdisciplinarity, we are talking about building new interdisciplinary programs. We are talking about exchanging, applying research methodology from one field to the other. But we are also talking about how we are going to overcome or address cultural transformation in the production and use of knowledge. So I think this takes us to address the question of asymmetries. There are social and political determinants in the production of knowledge that have historically produced development of intellectual, institutional and political centers and peripheries. And it's true that various countries, various universities, would say various disciplines, has served as a model to be emulated, and that means they have been the center of attention. But it's also true that we are not in a landscape of centers and undifferentiated peripheries. We are in a landscape in which there are potential or actual alternative centers which challenge the power of the given powers of disciplines and of countries and universities. So I think when we are questioning and opening to critique the disciplines as given closed, not open areas of knowledge, we are also at the same time looking at the new processes of networking and scholarly interaction. That has also been just mentioned. The new areas, the new challenges cannot be addressed if not within a network and within a collaboration among different sciences. So we are addressing interdisciplinarity from a perspective of asymmetries of powers and asymmetries of centers, but also of very other different knowledge divides, which are not just disciplines, but are articulating in many other areas. And I would like to recall a remark that was expressed by Thorsten Hegelstam, the famous scholar engaged in defining geographies of time and spaces, and he was remarking how innovation in research became possible, and the meta element that can be traced is bringing together strands of research which have been developing in separate conceptual frameworks within a new conceptual framework. And he has a nice, I think, metaphor, which is it's like as if a window is suddenly opened and allows us to see the world and to scrutinize new empirical relationships. I will not go into the discussion about interdisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, if not for the critique which has been often posed to interdisciplinarity as a way to generate new disciplines. And in this way, multidisciplinarity, metadisciplinarity have challenged the idea of crossing area of knowledge to let's say, increase fragmentation instead of building integration, and trying to stress the need that the other two categories should be integrated into interdisciplinarity, and thus putting a strong emphasis on the idea of integration of knowledge and to the need of building forms of different exchange across and beyond the disciplinary borders. Going to the central focus of my presentation, I would like to discuss with you the concept of the University of the Future and interdisciplinarity as looking at the two parallel processes, the process of the challenge of interdisciplinarity and the process of the challenge of internationalization. They are, of course, two processes which are to do with crossing boundaries. I think this is not just how to say parallel process, but it's also an important intersecting process between interdisciplinarity and internationalizations. I'm sorry because now it will look quite complicated. I tried to put on the screen the elements of interdisciplinarity and the elements of internationalizations, which our institutions are faced every day to address. When we are talking about interdisciplinarity, as I was mentioning before, we always need to look at the two dimensions. How are we integrating interdisciplinarity in teaching? How are we integrating interdisciplinarity in research? How is the challenge that comes from research goes into teaching or the other way around? We are also every day faced with the constraints and also the opportunities of the institutional and the intellectual environment. We are working in institutions which have made of the disciplines the way to recruit new professors. Through the disciplines we build the departments. Through the crossing the disciplines we build the interdisciplinary centers. So there is institutional movement of constraints which is not always going the direction we would like things to go in a perspective of epistemological reflection. And there is the third dimension, which is the dimension of the interaction of networks and scholars, which is on one hand individual, we have scholars interacting among themselves because research needs that, but we have also institutions networking, and the different layers of networking are sometimes crossing or intersecting disciplines, and sometimes are bound by disciplines. So this is an area which requires an important attention. When we are talking about the processes of internationalizations, I think we have a very important parallel dimension, because of course when we are talking about global challenges, we are addressing them in order to make our research more relevant, but also in order to make our students and our graduates more able to address and to engage towards those challenges. When we are looking at the institutional and the public dimension of our research, we are also looking at, we are also embedded in a national and in a regional policy cooperation, which is in some way molding our networks and our way of establishing relations with other universities, among research groups, and also within mobility flows. So I tried here to put the two processes which I had illustrated to you in a parallel way, in a consequential way, trying to emphasize the three elements which I think are crucial. One is the topic of the global challenges, which was emphasized before. Problems are different, so we need to act interdisciplinary and international. Participation to national and supranational policies makes us in some way acting within a scheme of powers and asymmetries which crosses our institutions and connects our institutions with the policies at a different level. And then there is the keyword mobility, because the mobility flows are the canvas to build partnerships and networks. So I think these three keywords should be at the center of the discussion when we talk about interdisciplinarity and international processes. So going briefly to our experience in the University of Bologna, facing these different challenges, if I look back to the last 10 years, what we have tried to do was to try to address two main areas of needs, with trying to build new tools which could help us to address those needs. So one of the needs was trying to be more successful, to participate in the European cause, because through this participation we could have produced more relevant research. At the same time, we wanted not just to participate in cause, but to be able to participate in the definition of the cause. So in designing which are the relevant topics in which research should be produced. As I was mentioning before, I think there is this important connection between what is done at an institutional level and how the institution relates to the context, to the national, regional, in this case to the European context. So what we tried to do was to build these kind of virtual communities of practice, which we called IRT, Integrated Research Teams, which are groups of colleagues facilitated by young, smart PhDs, trying to put expertise within the university in common and trying to see how this could generate new ideas, new proposals, and also new capacity to produce different kind of research. Of course, the idea of building platforms, interdisciplinary platforms within the university, was also an idea to have platforms which could connect with other platforms at different levels, at the national and especially at the international level. So what was done in the university was trying bottom up to generate this kind of platforms. We had three at the beginning. One was on food and the whole area of food production, food transformation, food consumption, health, bioeconomy, and all related fields, but not forgetting food culture, food literature, and all the also humanities aspects that are very much present in that platform. One platform about heritage science, how can we look at our heritage not just from a cultural point of view, but also as an area in which we need to develop new techniques, new materials, new specific tools to preserve it. We had a third group, third team on the social economy and civil society, mostly looking into the field of social innovation. We had a group on genome sequencing, and we recently, since 3 years, have a new research team which is on Brazil, as Roberto has just said. Why do I want to tell you something more about this IRT Brazil? Because in our university it was a very important development in the thinking about interdisciplinarity and internationalization. It was a way to see how far we could apply models which we had found successful in Europe in working with different contexts. And of course Brazil was a very important case study because we have many researchers working with Brazil or on topics related with Brazil. There was the very good connection with the Brazilian embassy when Ambassador Viegas was in Rome. And there was a challenge to articulate different forms of cooperation which were individual in a more interdisciplinary and institutional framework. So it was a way to encompass different needs. As you can see from a screenshot of the website, the integrated research teams works on 4 main interdisciplinary areas. One is about cultures, immaterial heritage, and interdisciplinary networks. The second one is about development quality, safety, social cohesion. A fourth on technology and context of sustainable growth. And the fourth one on improving health and environment. But we have many cross-cutting themes which connect people working on those themes in other forms of cooperation. So I think this is an interesting case study because it helped us to formulate questions and to think about new ways of working together and to encompass in the concept of interdisciplinarity also international cooperation and mobility flows. So I would just like to conclude with 3 questions from which I started in thinking about this presentation. So which kind of international activities should we engage in order to improve our interdisciplinary practice? Which are the kind of activities which are really helping us in fostering this or in addressing this challenge? And on the other hand, how can our actual interdisciplinary practice help us in rethinking our international dimension. And the third one, which I would really like to pose